the ascent and descent of the heart from inner soundness to inner corruption. Question 18. In what conditions does the heart rise into soundness or sink into corruption? Could you explain this in a way that sheds greater light on the subject? I replied, the heart is not a static organ of feeling, but a living axis of ascent and descent. In the state of spiritual rectification, the commanding ego, nafs al-amara bisu, is transformed into the self-reproaching ego, nafs al-lawama, and from there into the tranquil ego, nafs al-mutma'inna. At this stage, it is as though an inner transposition occurs. The tranquil ego assumes the station of the heart. The heart takes on the role of the spirit, ruh. The spirit ascends to the position of the soul, John, and the soul becomes intimately connected to the beloved, Janad. When the tranquil ego replaces the heart and the heart replaces the spirit, the heart, now refined and elevated, governs all bodily faculties and exercises authority over all actions, much like the spirit itself once did. Thus, the messenger of God, peace be upon him, said, if the heart is sound, the whole body becomes sound. There is a profound point to ponder here. Once the heart assumes authority over the limbs and the will of the person, not through coercion, but through its own intrinsic noble attributes, it transforms every plan, even one that is flawed or potentially corrupt, into something good and virtuous. It does not allow the person to commit even the smallest of misdeeds except in cases of interpretive error or momentary lapse. Without doubt, such individuals consistently initiate good works. They become vessels of benevolence, neither causing harm nor allowing any trace of wrongdoing to pass into God's creation through them. When the heart becomes a sanctuary emptied of self and smoke, mercy enthrones itself where the ego once spoke. Then no envoy stands between the order and the flame. The truth commands the heart directly without name. Rumi. What the mystics and realized knowers refer to as John's soul in their prose and poetry is, in truth, the purified human spirit. Muzaki Mu'ala. After the ego is purified, as mentioned earlier, the heart is cleansed of base inclinations, and in turn, the spirit is elevated to the station of the purified soul, John. At this level, the self that is at peace and pleasing to God, Mardiya, and the spirit, John, become the primary active forces in this sacred journey, establishing and sustaining their connection with the beloved. On the other hand, when a person yields to the pull of ego and submits to the leadership of Satan, their inner being becomes progressively disconnected from the beloved. And even if a trace of divine presence appears to remain, it exists only as illusion or fantasy, not as living awareness. In this state, the purified soul is demoted to the level of spirit. The spirit is reduced to the heart, and the heart descends, either suddenly or through gradual stages, to the level of the self-reproaching ego, and finally to the commanding ego. At this point, all bodily faculties and decisions are directed by egoic impulses, enslaved to carnal appetites, sensual excess, and moral debasement. When the heart descends and settles into the station of the commanding ego, it still exercises authority over all limbs and actions. However, its perception of virtue becomes inverted. Goodness appears unattractive, while corruption seems appealing. As a result, it consciously refuses to carry out righteous deeds. It is this state to which the prophet, peace be upon him, referred when he said, if the heart is corrupt, the entire body becomes corrupt. In such individuals, the destruction of persons or even entire societies holds little weight when measured against their selfish or perverse ambitions. Whatever the ego, under satanic direction, whispers into their heart, they act upon it with urgency and without remorse. The distinguishing trait of a sound heart is that once the soul is connected to the beloved, the individual perceives God as present and witnessing in all things and in every place. Therefore, they would never allow themselves to transgress against another, for they seek the pleasure of the Creator. Glorious is His majesty, through the well-being and joy of His creation. Among such noble souls are the great prophets and the exalted saints, may God's mercy be upon them all, who were commissioned to guide humanity with tireless compassion, patience, and devotion. By contrast, the indicators of a corrupted heart often scale with a person's intellectual reach, financial resources, or access to power. The greater their worldly means, the deeper and more far-reaching the damage their corruption tends to inflict. If you examine them closely, you will find that their central ambition is to preserve their own life and that of their close circle by whatever means they deem necessary. They spend their lives in selfish indulgence and vulgar pursuits. When legitimate paths fail to deliver their desires, they resort shamelessly to illicit or disgraceful methods to satisfy their urges. They cannot tolerate even brief exposure to truth, dismissing it instead as a burden upon the mind or a product of imagination. Concluding reflection. The heart, then, is the true command center of direction within the human being. When it ascends, the entire inner world rises with it. When it falls, all faculties descend into fragmentation and disorder. In the state of spiritual rectification, the enlightened faculties of the soul operate through the intellect as a processor, receiving inputs from experience, memory, and perception, organizing them and translating them into coherent understanding and action under the guidance of the heart. In this state, what is processed leads toward meaning, responsibility, and cultivation, benefiting both this world and the next. But when the heart abdicates its role as the inner command center and descends into the station of the commanding ego, the same processor continues to function, yet it now runs corrupted directives. Inputs are filtered through desire, priorities are hijacked, and decisions are optimized for selfish gain. The intellect does not resist, it simply executes. As a result, perception narrows, meaning collapses, and the world is reduced to a field of exploitation, a place to consume rather than to cultivate, to dominate rather than to serve. Thus, the destiny of the human being does not hinge on the speed or sharpness of intellect alone, but on which force governs the command center of the heart, and what kind of directives the intellect is processing.